Human Dynamics resilience programs are designed to empower leaders, energize teams, and create organizations that not only withstand pressure but excel through it. Let's work together to build resilience that drives performance and lasting growth.
Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the second episode of Human Dynamics Tibay Talks, mga kwento ng Katatagan at Tagumpay, where we explore practical conversations that support healthier people, stronger teams, and more sustainable workplaces. I am Marian, Associate Consultant of Human Dynamic Philippines, where we build resilience, enhance wellness, and develop sustainability through our employee assistance programs. Today, we are honored to have Ms. Blanche Marie Abeliana, who is a licensed psychologist with a deep interest in evidence-based therapeutic approaches, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and compassion-focused therapy. Her passion for these modalities is rooted in their practical and empowering frameworks, which she integrates into her clinical work to support clients from different walks of life. She placed second in the 2017 psychometrician licensure examination and fourth in the 2024 psychologist licensure examination. And she continues to ground her work in academic rigor and compassionate client-centered care. Good afternoon, Ms. Blanche. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Miss Marian. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Miss Blanche. No, before we formally dive into my first question, Miss Blanche, I'd
Mm.
like to briefly recap our pilot
Oh.
episode for our viewers, where we discussed why burnout is not a badge of honor. So we talked
Mm.
about how many of us have developed the mindset of equating exhaustion with achievement, and we also discussed how workplace and societal culture reinforce that perspective. And of course, we also tackled about some of the early warning signs of burnout that we should all be aware of. This afternoon, we will be exploring another equally important topic, one that I believe deserves to be a regular part of any workplace wellness conversations, and that
Mm.
is preventing compassion fatigue.
Mm.
So, Miss Blanche, without further ado, can you explain to us what compassion fatigue is and how it differs from stress or burnout?
Oh, okay. So let's start with the definition of compassion
Yeah.
fatigue, since it's usually the less familiar to the layman compared to stress or burnout. You may often hear, especially in the workplace, I'm already stressed, I'm already experiencing burnout, but it's very rare when people actually label it as compassion fatigue. So let's start with that. What is compassion fatigue? So, by definition, it's the exhaustion that builds up from caring for other people, from being exposed again and again to their pain, struggles, and their suffering. So it's usually called the cost of caring, which captures it quite well. And in distinguishing the three, in distinguishing compassion fatigue, stress, and burnout, a good way to distinguish them would be to identify the source of saan siya galing. San galing yung ganong experience mo. So, starting with stress. Stress usually comes from anything external, any external demand. So, usually in the workplace, that would be like a deadline, a difficult conversation with a manager or colleague, heavy workload, and it's usually more passing. So maybe once the stressor, like the external demand is lifted, like for example, if na-meet mo na yung deadline mo, na-complete mo na yung task mo for the day, then it usually gets lifted once it passes and you tend to recover. On the other hand, burnout is very similar to stress, but ang main difference lang is that it's more chronic. So it's stress that builds up over time. So for example, if after a deadline passes, you get another deadline, and may ganyang cycle, then you're very prone to experiencing burnout, especially if there's minimal na recovery in between. So how this looks like, yung consequence ng burnout and its manifestations, which you probably tackle during the last na Tibay talks, would be really like physical, emotional depletion, ganyan. Like you don't want to work anymore because of how tired you are. So, yung difference naman ng compassion fatigue compared to burnout and stress is that it's more relational and emotional. So rather than being tied to workload or pressure, it's really ganyan, like emotional siya. So it can affect you even if your job is going well, even if you're performing well sa trabaho mo, because it's more the labor that you do emotionally. So how it may look like and how it manifests for people is usually being drained emotionally, being really depleted, and like a sense of numbness na, and like I don't know what I feel anymore. So that's how it usually shows up. Yeah. Is that clear ba yung distinction ng tatlo?
Right. Yes, that's a really helpful distinction, Miss Blanche, no?
Mm.
And personally, mahalaga, no, na maintindihan natin kung ano yung pagkakaiba-iba nila. Kasi pag
Yeah.
maintindihan natin, of course, mas maintindihan natin kung saan tayo nanggagaling, right? At kung
Yeah,
anong
that's right.
suporta yung kailangan natin, right? So sabi mo
Mm.
nga, stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue, they may look similar, but they
Yeah.
usually stem from different experiences, right? And we
Mm.
know that the compassion fatigue usually has a strong, unique emotional component, right? That
Yeah.
comes from constantly caring for or supporting others, right? So now let's talk about who is the most vulnerable to experiencing it, right? Is it limited to helping professions or
Mm.
any employees in any role can experience it?
There is usually an assumption that it only happens to certain job titles
Mhm.
like nurses or
Right.
counselors, as psychologists, therapists. So those in caring professionals where compassion is like the currency of the work. It takes up much of the work that you do. They're definitely at a higher risk. So that includes social workers, first responders, teachers, HR professionals, just to name a few. But it also extends to roles that people may not always think of in this context. So, for example, customer service representatives. So, a lot of them are usually on the front line, constantly facing the public, absorbing their concerns, frustrations, or complaints. Like day after day. So there's a similar exposure there emotionally, even though it's
Mhm.
not always labeled as caregiving. So just like we talked about earlier, compassion fatigue is really emotional and relational labor. So that also happens for work like customer service representatives. And it's also not just limited to those professions or in the workplace. Can also show up informally. Like for example, if you're a manager and usually sige tumatakbo yung mga subordinates mo or colleagues mo when they have problems, when they need support. Also, if you're the type of colleague na uh, everyone usually naturally confides in, gusto ng mga tao mag-share sa'yo. And if you're simply empathic by nature and mas nakaka-absorb ka ng mga strong emotions and you take on what's around you without meaning to, ganyan. And I would say also in the family system, So it could
Mm.
also show up like that. Like for example, if you're a mother, now you're taking care of a toddler, you're taking of care of children, and if you're a daughter, a son, you're taking care of an aging parent. So that could also you could also be prone to experiencing compassion fatigue because there's still a lot of emotional labor at work there. So more than the job title, I would say it's really about regular exposure to people's difficulties and having to do emotional labor and most of the time, like since it's like labeled as compassion fatigue, like not having the right support to process it or having minimal recovery emotionally.
Mm. Right. I do agree with your statements, no, Miss Blanche, and I appreciated how you expanded it from different roles, different
Mm,
job, diba? Even fathers, right, can
yeah.
experience
Mm,
compassion fatigue. And many
yeah. Mm,
Filipinos, no, they tend to associate compassion fatigue only with healthcare workers, diba,
yeah.
counselors, social workers, right? But as you have shared, anyone who is constantly supporting, caring for,
Mm,
especially carrying the emotional weight of others can be vulnerable to experiencing
yeah.
compassion fatigue, right? So kahit anong
Mm,
industry, kahit anong role mo, pwede ka maka-experience ng compassion fatigue, especially when emotional demands are part of an individual's day-to-day work, right? So coming
yeah.
from this perspective, Tanj, we also see that many employees want to support their colleagues, right? But at the same time, they also want to protect their own well-being. So how do you think can we balance compassion for others with healthy boundaries?
Yeah, that's a very good question because for some people, setting a boundary may seem like they're being unkind or they're being a bad person or at least not as good as they
Mhm.
used to be. But that's definitely not the case. Like it's not unkind to set boundaries. It's really important. So I would say a good starting point is checking your capacity first. So connecting with yourself and asking honestly how much space you have to give to a person in that moment. So that's not selfish talaga. It's simply realistic for you to check on yourself first. So just like they always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So that's usually the analogy that they make there when talking about compassion fatigue. So that's why you have to replenish, refill your cup first before you can give to others. So if you try to offer more than you genuinely have, if you're already running empty, you're already depleted, then you'll be less in a position to help others and yeah, even yourself. Like you'll be depriving yourself because you'd be at pretty much at a negative if your cup is already empty and you're still trying to pour. So that's a good start. Like just checking in with yourself, like asking the question, like, kumusta ako ngayon? Like, do I have the mental space to give to this person during this moment? And then from there, it helps to be clear about what's within your control and what isn't. So what's within your control usually is the support you can offer. So for example, lending someone your attention, listening to them being present with them, like showing empathy. What's beyond your control usually are the circumstances themselves. So usually the things that need fixing. So their difficulties are not yours to carry talaga. So that's a distinction there between empathy and absorption. So you can be empathic with them, like, oh, your feelings are valid. I hear you. Must be difficult, ganyan. But when it comes to absorption, it would be like you're trying to take the pain from them. You're trying to carry their crosses for them. So you can be fully empathic without crossing to absorption. So have to be careful about that. What's within your control and what's beyond it. So once that distinction is clear, it becomes easier na to introduce small boundaries. So in your own ways. So you can try to reinforce, for example, that you're not immediately available, you're not always there for them 24/7. So for example, if this person who usually confides in you is used to you replying immediately, then you can start introducing small boundaries by maybe putting some gaps in between before you reply to them. Like maybe you can give it a few hours before you reply to them, because that would express to them, that would communicate to them na, okay, I'm not always available for you. And if sa workplace scenario naman, maybe you can be strict with your working hours. Like if may colleague ka or may subordinate ka na message sa'yo kahit anong oras, ganyan, and then what they usually share is heavy stuff, then you can say something like, oh, I'll get back to you when I'm at the office na, ganyan, or you can be clear with them na, oh, this is my working hours, ganyan. I'm hearing you, I'm listening to you, I'm reading your messages, but I'll get back to you na when I'm at the office. So ganyan, like having those small boundaries that would help teach the person din na you're not always there immediately for them. So it's just being honest and also respectful.
Right. I appreciate that perspective, Miss Blanche, no? It's a reminder that building boundaries, no, doesn't mean we care any less. Diba?
Yeah.
It's a way for us to continue showing up, diba, in a healthy and sustainable way. Sabi mo nga,
Yeah.
we can pour from an empty cup. So dapat
Mm,
full muna tayo, diba? Unahin muna natin yung sarili natin before really giving a part of ourselves to other people. That's
yeah.
very wonderful, right? Now, at this point, Miss Blanche, no, it's not sufficient that we only tackled about compassion fatigue, but also we want our viewers to leave today's conversation with practical strategies that they may
Oh.
apply to actually prevent it from happening. No? So what can we actually do about it, right? So Miss Blanche, if someone realizes that he or she may be experiencing compassion fatigue, what are the first steps to a person should take, and when should a person actually consider seeking professional support?
So the first step, no, in ganyan, like what someone can do if they're
Yes.
recognizing
Mm.
compassion fatigue in themselves. So I would say the first step is really just naming it, putting a label to what you're experiencing, and understanding that it's a common and valid response. So there's nothing wrong with you. So if you're watching this and you're seeing yourself in what you're talking about, especially what we discussed earlier about the differences between stress, burnout, and compassion fatigue. If you're recognizing that what you're experiencing feels more like compassion fatigue, then yeah, just a good start would be naming it, like, oh, it might be compassion fatigue that I'm experiencing. So just like what we talked about now, if the source of what you're experiencing is more emotional and relational, because a lot of people who are prone to compassion fatigue are those that are naturally compassionate. So from the word itself, yung mga like usually supportive to other people. So most of the time, there's a lot of shame when you become depleted already, and you become drained in the presence of another person. So naming is part of is really like a good way to help take away the shame, because like I said, it's really a common and valid response if you're already constantly pouring, and you're not leaving much for yourself. So ganyan, like from there, once you've labeled your experience na might be compassion fatigue, so it helps also to pause and assess your load. So how much can you maybe offload to another person? So for example, if it's part of your work, like let's say you're a counselor and you meet 5 clients per day. So if you're finding na that's not sustainable anymore. And maybe you can speak to your clients about moving them to a different day. Or maybe you can speak to a colleague na, oh, can you take over this case for me? Ganyan, like assessing na what you can realistically handle. And then self-care also matters here. So whatever that may look like for you personally. So that's really part of refilling and replenishing your cup and giving yourself the emotional recovery that you need to continue giving the care to other people. So whatever that might look like for you. So it could be that you're more into movement, like you could play pickleball, jogging, running, or you could be more into more quiet activities. So just like reading, watching movies, so whatever works for you talaga. So it's important to connect with yourself na, okay, I I find na when I'm reading, tends to calm me down, tends to help uh, recharge me. So ganyan, like finding something that genuinely restores you and making space, making time for it. That's very important for emotional recovery. And the last question was about professional support, right?
Mm.
Yeah, because there are times talaga na, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, or if you've been experiencing compassion fatigue for a very, very long time, then, self-care strategy, self-management may not be enough. So usually in mental health, we consider the 4 Ds when we're trying to uh, not only diagnose but also uh, s- like check cases that need clinical attention. But the four among those would be like most relevant here. So, example, there's dysfunction. So, if it's already interfering with how you function day to day, like if it's already interfering with your work, then that must mean something is really wrong and you need professional support. Another would be distress. If there's really like a lot of emotional suffering there, like because of being constantly exposed to other people's suffering, then you feel that way as well already. Like you feel a lot of emotional pain, then that's also a telltale sign. And another would be uh, also deviance. So deviance would mean like something that's different from how you normally respond. So for example, if for this person, if you're around this person, you usually get energized, but then there's a noticeable shift suddenly, and that really may point to signs that there's something wrong. And also if it's really like something that's different from how you usually operate. And also like things like uh it's taking up much of your time. Like if it's taking up much of your time, like you devote most of your time to speaking to someone, caring for others, and also can also show up in your intrusive thoughts. Like if you constantly think of another person, how they're suffering, that's another sign. And lastly, duration. So, like I said, if it's been persisting for a while and you've tried some self care strategy, self management, but it's not making a dent, then that might mean that you would be better supported by a professional already. But I'd also like to add that you don't have to wait until you're really struggling. So you don't have to wait until your cup is really empty before you seek support. You can be more preventative rather than reactive, because seeking help is not only for healing once things have become difficult. Could also be a way of better understanding your own experience, or it's simply a form of self-care in itself. So just like with our phones, di ba? Like with our devices, it's very rare now we only charge when we get to zero, because that would damage our battery health by a lot. So if we can give the same care to our phones, our devices, it's also important sa sarili din natin. So you don't have to wait until you're empty talaga. Like even if you're still like at 25%, 30%, you can do the first step and ask for help. So where it's available, then if you have employee assistance program in your workplace, so it's good to turn to that resource before things escalate, and not only after.
Mhm. Right, no? And all these, no, it starts with naming actually the feeling,
Mm,
right? So it
yeah.
just says a lot about being aware of what we
Mm,
feel, kung ano yung nararamdaman natin. Kasi eventually, it would lead us to the proper support. Ano yung kakailanganin nating suporta? Be it
mm,
with another colleague, with the family, or with a professional na. Right? So,
yeah.
naming the feeling, labeling it, diba? Not being
Mm,
afraid to label the feeling and actually having that awareness. Na okay, this might be a fashion fatigue already, and I need to fill up my cup already kasi I don't want it to be totally drained. Katulad lang ng kung paano ko alagaan yung phone ko, yung laptop ko, or yung
yeah.
any gadget. That's a very, very wise analogy or analogy, Miss Blanche, right? And I also liked how you gave us a comprehensive explanation that it's good to seek professional support when we are already experiencing the 4Ds, right? You
Mm,
mentioned about depression,
mm,
deviance, danger, dysfunction, right? So it's a good
mm,
uh, glimpse for our viewers to know kapag ka talagang kailangan na nila ng
yeah.
professional support. And not just, owning the feeling na sila lang. Right? Kasi mahirap yun. Okay? And of course, I also liked how you framed preventive and not reactive, right? It's a
Yeah.
better, I think that's the very agenda of this conversation. How to prevent
Yeah.
actually
Mm.
compassion fatigue, 'di ba? At
Not
hindi natin
healing.
hayaan, right? Na
Mm.
talagang ma-feel natin siya in the first place.
Mm.
Now, to cap things off, Miss Blanche, no, if you could leave our viewers with one key message about sustaining compassion while also caring for themselves, what would it be?
I would say that, uh, 'di ba the instinct when you're depleted, especially if it's compassion fatigue and the source there is emotional and relational. So the instinct usually is to pull away from people altogether, to isolate, be by yourself. But the answer usually isn't less connection, but more honest connection. So just like what we talked about, honest connection with yourself. So staying attuned to your own limits is really part of staying genuinely present for others. So real compassion is not endless sacrifice, not endless self-sacrifice, or not martyrdom. So that's really a narrow idea of what caring for someone means. So actual compassion, especially sustainable compassion, requires you to stay whole enough to keep offering it. So the most caring thing you can do, I would say, over time, especially, is to take care of yourself. So it's a prerequisite talaga to caring for others. Taking care of yourself.
Right. Taking care of yourself and naming your capacity to that, checking in
Yeah.
with what you can do versus what you cannot do, right? Just like
Mm.
what you have mentioned earlier. So very, very wonderful message for our viewers. Ms. Blanche, thank you so much again for sharing with us your knowledge and expertise on preventing compassion fatigue. Isa sa pinakatumatak na mensahe ay maaari nating isipin na stress lang tayo or overwork lang
Mm.
tayo. Pero in reality, no, we may be experiencing compassion fatigue already, right? Without
Mm.
even realizing. So whether you are a people leader, an HR practitioner, diba, a counselor, a teacher, a customer service representative, right? Or simply someone who others often rely on, tandaan na posible nating alagaan ng ating mga sarili habang inaalagaan din natin ibang mga tao.
Mm.
Right? Thank you so much again for a very wonderful conversation, Miss Blanche. And for our viewers, thank you for joining us as well. And we hope that you have learned how to protect your well being while continuing to care for others. If you found today's session meaningful, please don't forget to like our Facebook page, Human Dynamic Philippines, and share this YouTube video with your colleagues and friends. We'll see you again on our next practical conversation on workplace well-being and resilience. This is Marian, and this is Tibay Talks, mga kwento ng katatagan at tagumpay.
Thank you.